Well, welcome back to Shop Talk. Of course, I'm Mike Festiva. This is episode 2. Anyhow, thank you so much for tuning in on the last episode. I really enjoyed reading the comments. You guys did what I asked you to do, just kind of mention what state, province, or country you're from. And of course, we had a lot of people throughout the US and Canada, a lot of people from Germany, and a really surprising number of people from Australia. So that was really cool to see that. I really appreciate it, and some of you wrote about what you did for work and shared some interesting engineering stories and other stories. So that was pretty cool. I enjoyed it. It felt like a community. And speaking of that, I've been having a harder time getting back to all the comments and writing back to everybody. So if you see in any of my videos where someone's asking a simple welding question or fabrication question, and if I may or may not have time to get back to them, if you know the answer to it and can give the person helpful, supportive feedback and information, answer the question, please feel free to do that, because it kind of builds a little bit more of a community on the channel. So in this first part, I really actually want to talk about tools and the lack of when I first started this YouTube channel. Matter of fact, like I mentioned in the other episode, I built a bandsaw mill. I want to share with everybody how I built it from scratch, but I really didn't plan to have a YouTube channel at the time, and I had very few tools, and having very few tools to build something like a bandsaw mill forces you to design things different, engineer things with the lack of a lathe and other tools like that, and it really causes you to think outside the box if you want to complete that. And actually, we'll talk a lot more about that subject once we walk up to the bandsaw mill in a little bit. We'll cover that later, so stick around for that. But when I started out, basically 6-7 years ago on this channel, I didn't really have many tools. As you see, there's a lot of tools now. I got plenty of welders now. I've always wanted TIG in the past. Now I have a few of them. But I didn't really have much, and we're going to go into detail about if you don't have many tools, don't be discouraged. You can build up to it. But when I started out building my bandsaw mill, I built it with a Weld Pack 100 Lincoln that was broken. A friend gave me as a flux welder, welded about 1/8" steel. That thing was broken, motor drive was messed up, and Lincoln discontinued the parts for it. Even the name brand stuff you can't always get parts for. So I was able to glue the motor drive, plastic one of all things, back together, and then metal band it and use fiberglass and epoxy to kind of glue it back together, and it worked just fine. But I had that little Weld Pack 100. I had a 4.5-inch angle grinder. I think it ran for about 8-9 years, little Harbor Freight one. And I bought a used metal cutting bandsaw that was pretty haggard when I got another Harbor Freight tool. Still have it, just had to replace the gearbox bearings in it at some point in the past. But that, and then maybe a few little hand tools, like a hand drill, a few other tools like that. But I built the whole bandsaw mill that way. When you don't have a lathe and tools like that, it forces you to really think outside the box and work with the tools you have. But you can simplify it, and we'll go into a lot more detail on that when we walk up to the bandsaw mill in a bit. But let's go back and talk about tools here. And if you don't have much in your shop, I have a lot more tools in here. Matter of fact, one of the last few videos I posted, somebody was kind of griping and irritated that I had a CNC in my shop and I had a welder and all this different stuff, and the guy was kind of irritated. And basically I wrote back to a guy and said, this didn't happen overnight. This is like the last 6 to 7 years of me saving any bit of extra cash I had and investing in myself. I dabbled with the fabrication before this at my job and at home, but the problem was if I want to build anything, and weld anything over 1/8 inch, I had to go over to my buddy Dave's house because he had a higher amperage MIG welder where I could weld thicker steel. Usually I do bigger projects at my work after hours or at my buddy Dave's house, like we welded up and built a box scraper for my tractor. Had to do it at his house. I started realizing I enjoyed fabrication more and more, and I had just kind of a chintzy old welder and some broken tools. And so I really want to invest back into myself, but it's kind of tough to put the money out, especially when you don't have much money. Basically, I ended up doing was putting about 6-7 months worth of money, just a little bit extra I had at the time, aside. I wanted to get a welder that was capable of welding up to 1/4 inch. Keep in mind, there wasn't as many bargain basement inverter machines on the market at the time. I was looking at the most affordable welder I could kind of get my hands on was going to be the Hobart. I think it was 180 amp. So 220 machine, it weighed like 80-90 pounds. It was super heavy. Being 220 only didn't really fit my bill, but it did have the possibility to run a spool gun, and I think it was $900 or $1,200, something like that. So I was kind of had my mind set on that, even though it didn't seem like the right welder. It was really heavy, really clunky. It was a big transformer machine. And then Harbor Freight came out with the Omni Pro when I was still saving up for that Hobart, and I decided, like, man, I looked online, no one had anything other than unboxing videos, no one was welding with them. I never did review videos prior to that. But it's so frustrating looking at people unbox them in their living room and talking about the screen and stuff, but never actually doing anything with it. So I said, that's a lot of money for me to spend at Harbor Freight. It made me very leery, you know, saving up for 8 months or something. But I went out and bought the extended warranty, bought it, welded with it for a few months, did my first review on it. Because I was actually showing someone building something, people enjoyed that. It kind of got me started in making some review videos. Of course, the trolls come out too, because if you're not working with Lincoln, Hobart, or Miller, then the guys instantly discredit you that you don't know anything you're doing. I've gotten so many nasty troll comments. A lot of people I try to reason with or just block, because people have called me almost every name in the book. And instantly, because you're welding with the Harbor Freight equipment, you don't know what you're talking about is basically how they would treat you. But those guys can go kick rocks. I don't really care. But back to the welder. I got the old Harbor Freight Omni Pro, and I was really impressed with it. That's why I started doing some review videos. And one that really brought the trolls out is at the time my buddy just bought, I think we both bought our welders within 6 months of each other. He had a Miller Matic 200 multi-process machine that sold for like $2,000. My Harbor Freight welder I bought for about $750. I did a video, I'll put a link to it over here, where I welded those with them side by side at his shop, and they both did pretty damn well. Pretty impressed with both of them, but the Harbor Freight was something I can actually afford to build the things I want. I couldn't imagine putting $2,000 out, because it took me 7-8 months to save up for a $750 welder. What we're going to go into now is talking about like kind of stepping stones to build up your tools in your shop. Building the bandsaw mill, I knew I needed a better welder after I was done with that. And so that was my next tool I was saving up for. Got the Omni Pro, started welding with it, worked really well. And at that point, I'm like, man, I really need to get some more equipment in the shop. So my mindset was, I need a lathe at some point. My friend Dave didn't have one. I didn't have one at the work at the time. And so I started saving up some money. I think I saved for about a year, and I got a lathe. I'll show you guys a picture of it over here. It's like a mid-80s Taiwan built lathe. It's nothing fancy. It came with some tooling. But the thing was, I needed a lathe, and I wasn't going to be able to afford like a super high-end, super precision lathe. I just needed something I could start turning down some shafts and making some more elaborate projects, like the articulated dump truck, for stuff like that. And so I started saving up. It took me about a year. I kept searching on Craigslist, and something would pop up. As soon as it was posted, it would sell. So basically, I just kept saving money, and I had about $1,800, and that's what the lathe cost me. And I was able to get the guy to hold it. It was one of the first people to call. Matter of fact, I said, hey, you snowboard? I used to. And I said, I got a snowboard for you. Can you just hold it till the end of the week? I'm coming over, give you that snowboard. And me and my buddy picked up the lathe. And that was a turning point for me to getting better tools and investing in myself more. Shortly after that, I started looking out for plasma machines. I had a cheapo plasma cutter, and Harbor Freight actually took notice of, I think I bought like 3 or 4 different Harbor Freight welders out of pocket and did a bunch of reviews on them, trying them out because I wanted a TIG machine as well. And I tried the titanium 200 after the Omni Pro, and they noticed it and they started running them in their ads. I'm like, hey guys, I see you're running my videos in your Harbor Freight ads. That's fine, whatever. But I've spent a few thousand out in my pocket over the years on your machines, testing them, and I like them. But can you guys help me out sometime? If a new product's coming out, maybe you can send me something. And I said, I don't want any cash from you because I want to keep my reviews completely honest. They never offered me money, and I never asked for any money. But they did send me out that titanium 45 plasma, which you guys have probably seen it cutting a lot of stuff with my CNC table. And that was like a one-up for me, man. They sent me a nice machine. I think they ran 750 to 850 at the time. So they sent me out that to test out. They said, you don't even have to do a review on it. Just want to tell you, run our products enough. I want to know if they're actually fit the quality and perspective, what you think our titanium product should be. And I ran it. I really liked it. Felt like the fit and build was very good on it. I think after I had it for about 4 months, they came out on the market and they said, if you want to do a review, you can, but you don't have to. We just wanted to send it out to you, see what you thought about it. So I did a review on that, but that was a big step forward for me because that was money I didn't have to put out on a machine, even though I was saving up for one. So I took that money I had and saved for another 4 or 5 months, and I found the Langmuir Systems CNC table. Now, I couldn't buy their bigger table, it was on pre-order, but I could afford their smallest table. And I think at the time it was like $1,500. I bought a few upgrades. But because I used the leverage of getting that plasma And I took a gamble because it was unknown if it would work on a CNC machine, and kept my fingers crossed and it did. And bought myself the cheapest CNC table I could afford, and you guys saw that being used a lot building my articulating dump truck. Having CNC capabilities in the shop was awesome, but I kind of sometimes wanted a slightly bigger table. And I also wanted to see height control for warped metal and things like that. And that I decided to sell that to a friend for pretty cheap. And then I ended up putting that money to get a bigger table. And I've been happy with the XL version of the Langmuir table. Going back to, I've gotten a few nasty comments here and there about me having all kinds of tools in my shop now. It's taken 7 years or so, after just starting with like a broken welder that I patched together and got working, and a used metal cutting bandsaw and a few other basic tools. It took me 6 or 7 years of like basically investing in myself, knowing that I like metal fabrication and doing this stuff enough, and making videos to share with you guys, that I could invest anything I made. And of course the YouTube channel's grown. I do make a little bit of money with it too now. So anything I make for the last first 4 years on YouTube, I'd always put that into account. When I had enough money, I'd buy another tool. I was pretty broke for a long portion of my life, so I'm pretty frugal about what I get. Again, I run a lot of Harbor Freight welders because they work for me. I don't need a glistening brand new Miller or Lincoln in here. Matter of fact, I kind of like working with the underdogs. Like, that's kind of me in my whole life. I've always been working with half broken stuff and motorcycles and whatever. Friends have had glossy new nice dirt bikes. I've had like pieced together ones I could get running. I don't mind trying out, like, say for instance, the Yes welder. It works great for all my projects. I don't need a $2,000 multi-process welder when a $350, $400 welder works fine for me. If the tool does what I need it to do and it gets a job done, that's good for me. If it works great, I'm happy with it, and I'm happy with these machines. My persona doesn't ride on a brand. I don't have that kind of brand loyalty, and you get that with a lot of trolls on my YouTube channel when people leave rude comments. It's kind of funny how that is. I'm just happy, like, if the tool's made for a specific job, it doesn't have to be the nicest tool for that job. It just needs to work and do its job properly. You wouldn't believe how often I get, 1 to 5 trolls a week, like really nasty people that I just end up blocking because they just are just so rude. It always comes down to brand loyalty, and it's gone so far where people being so rude because I got Harbor Freight welders and stuff in my shop that I don't think I'll run anything other than the underdog guys, the guys that don't get credit from these professional welders, because they work for me. And the reason why I show these tools working and what I can do with them is to show you don't have to have the nicest of the nice to get out and work in your shop and do things and build stuff. If you have fun with it and the welders do what they're supposed to do, instead of buying a $2,000 or $3,000 plasma torch, you could buy a $600 plasma torch and buy a $1,500 table and basically be running a full small CNC table with a plasma in your shop for just the cost of a name brand plasma alone. For me, going back that multi-process $750 Harbor Freight welder, my buddy had $2,000 out on his. They weld the same. Basically, I'd rather spend $750 and have the rest of that $2,000 available to buy some other tool, like a lathe. That's just my mindset on it. Enough talking with this. Let's go up and actually go up to the mill, and I'm going to show you guys how I actually built that thing with some basic tools. And the whole point of this video here is kind of encourage you, even if you don't have very much, that's okay. You can start from there. Utilize those few tools you have and do the most you can with them. Don't let that hold you back, because I've seen too many people in life have the nicest of the nice in their shop and they don't do anything with them. You could have a lot of nice tools, but if they sit around and yeah, you got all this name brand stuff, you can have some really nice equipment or you can have some cheap stuff, but just really do what you can with it. Make do with what you got and utilize it to its fullest. All right, let's go up to the mill. So this is my DIY bandsaw mill, and some of you longtime subscribers are probably seeing it. New to the channel, you probably didn't dig back quite a few years to see this. I'll put a little link over here to the first video I ever made, or maybe a playlist of this thing. But like I said, when I started out with building this mill, I had very little tools. It really forced me to kind of think outside the box. It would have been really nice to have a lathe for it, but I managed without it. This kind of goes into engineering. We were talking about that quite a bit in the last video. When you're working with very few tools, I kind of like to approach things in a way, what's the easiest way to reach that end goal? and what can I repurpose that gets me halfway to that goal. So for instance, I was talking to one of my friends about building a mill, and he's like, you know what, I wonder if you could use some that use pallet racking and lay some of that down. And I was able to get a few chunks that didn't match the rest of our pallet racking at work, so I was able to get it for free. And so that's what this whole track is made out of, pallet racking, like you'd see at big box stores like Costco and things like that. Those lay down on the side. The cross beams are cut down into log bunks through here. I'll get some close-ups and show you. I was able to lay that pallet racking down, and then I had salvage angle edged, and I just laid it on top of it, and then had casters over here that are V groove casters, so they'd ride on top of it. It made it extremely affordable because I salvaged it. You can find the stuff cheap on Craigslist as well. And for the log hold downs, just some adjustable bars I did on the other side here that could slide up and down. And on this side over here is some broken pipe clamps. We use a lot of them for gluing blocks at my work. And so these are just pipe clamps that were just broken bits and pieces. I dug through an old box and got the parts I needed out of them. And that you can slide up and down on a piece of pipe and crank it down, lock the log in place. Works pretty well. This wheel right here, you can see it's a motorcycle wheel. And I utilized 2 swing arms and 2 front tires on here. So if I did it ever again, I'd use motorcycle wheels again. They work great. They're super thin, skinny I should say, so they have like a nice crown, and I've never had a problem with tracking at all on it. Maybe if you're cutting a ton of hardwood, you might have an issue with how tight you can tension the blades, but basically to take the blade off, you air the tires down and you roll the blade off. Roll a new one on, air the tires up, and once you tracked it from the beginning, when I first set it originally like 7 years ago, I haven't had a fiddle with the tracking at all. It's been really trouble-free. I mostly cut Douglas fir and cedars. I've cut a little bit of alder and a little bit of maple up here, and I don't really like cutting maple that much. I've used Douglas fir and cedar far more. This is a big cedar I'm sitting on right here. But we'll go over some other things I salvage on the mill, some little closer ups, and just thinking outside the box, like that pallet racking, like I said, it didn't take much to get that to the end goal. And like I said in the other video about thinking about things in components so you don't get overwhelmed, like I was able to break down the track as just one component, build that, build the log bunks, build the log clamps as another component, and the whole thing applied to the mill as well. I basically modified the swing arms and narrowed them up, welded them together, and the wheel supports, and then made them the mount of the wheels, and that was my main component. And then from there I just had to mount that in some type of mechanism that could slide up and down on the mill frame, and then figure out where the engine's going to sit and the jack shaft, and figure out the gearing from there. But all those things were basically built into small components, and it really helps you not get overwhelmed on a project. They can all come together and get yourself a mill or whatever you want to build. So we'll go over here. I'm going to bring the mill out from in here, and we'll go over a few more things about it. Later on, after I built the mill, I added a power feed to it, and adjustable height control and electric throttle, all kinds of different things. So bring the camera over here and talk about the other stuff on the other side of the mill. So this original mill, back when it was manual form, you know, basically you would push it down the track here and cut the wood and then bring it back. Everything is manual, manual crank for height adjustment, manual for the throttle control and turn on and off the blade lube. But I think I built for 250 or 350 bucks. Like the motor, I told my neighbor I was building a mill. He was super excited because he had some trees he wanted milled. He gave me a motor that he salvaged for free from a fishing boat. I think it was an air pump for snorkel divers that go down and get gooey ducks and stuff. And I think they replace the engines on those boats quite often for the air pumps because the guy's lives depend on it. So he was working at a shipyard at the time and was able to pick it up from a diver's boat. Sat in his garage for 6 or 7 years until I built the mill, and he's like, I got the motor for you. And in return, I just milled him a bunch of cedar as just a thank you. I think I mentioned this in other videos too. If you just let people know what you're looking for, hey, I'm looking for, you know, 12-horse engine or anything like that, or pallet racking, tell enough friends of it that you know, they'll probably come up with something too. So it always helps having some friends know what parts you're looking for. But the original mill was built for very cheap. And then after I had that set up, I wanted to do a power feed because pushing this thing back and forth day after day, you kind of get tired out. And I was like, at one time I was thinking, well, maybe I could do this as a side job, milling stuff. But then pushing the mill back and forth, I was like, that'd be a brutal day of work for 150 bucks. And I don't think you could charge much more for that. And it didn't seem like it was going to be very feasible. So at the time, I did not know 12 or 24 volt, I should say, wheelchair motors existed so cheap on eBay. Since then, I bought some for various projects. You can run them at 12 volts, just go about half the speed. But at the time, I built the power feed. I was at a friend's place, and he had this like 12 volt golf caddy. I got a whole video on building this. He had this little 12 volt golf caddy, and he got it at a garage sale for cheap. He's like, what do you think about this? You guys need this for anything? And it's like, that looks like a power feed. So basically, he gave it to me, and it was geared too tall, so I coupled it to a Harbor Freight boat winch. I'll put a little link to the video series building the power feed. I also put limit switches so you can return the mill home, and it just stops when it gets home. My idea with that was going to take a ton of load off me pushing this, and the mill will drive itself down the tree, and metered. So the mill just moves at the exact same speed. You get the best cut that way. After that, I was doing felt like a lot of work when you would basically go over here, you throttle it up, and then I'd turn on this little valve over here for my blade lube every time. Then when I'd get to the end of the cut, shut that off and throttle it down. That was getting old, so I made a electric solenoid throttle control, and at the same time when I turn this switch up here, and it also turns on a solenoid for water, and it gives the blade lube. You just switch the switch, goes back to idle, and stops the water. That was another nice thing. And I still had a boat winch up here, and it was slow cranking, and it wasn't that bad, but it was a little awkward. A friend gave me this. It was a 12 volt little ATV winch, and I ended up since making up a little bit of kind of a metered board height control with some micro switches. I did another video. I can put links of this down below in the description if you want to see that. And my idea at one point was to sit back here and control the mill, let it cut down, return, and you can do these little guides. I'll grab the board that's cut and return it to you back where the camera's sitting. And I could just run the board back here, run the mill, control it all from a panel over here, drop it down. It's kind of nice being away from the mill. It's not as loud and dusty. And I could just make all the cuts from a panel. But as you see, the mill sits underneath this little structure here, and the rest of the track and everything's out here, but you still got a lot of rain and moisture in the air. And I had enough electronic components on here that I just felt like adding any more in a control panel ways. I was going to get to a point where the mill got very efficient, but then became inefficient because of some failure on a little micro switch or something. So I decided to still just keep the controller up here and not deal with any of that other stuff. And I don't mind it because I can turn it on, walk away from the mill, let it make its cut, return it, and it works pretty well. I have enough features on this control box where I'm pretty happy where it's at. If this was in an enclosed area, I could fully control it with a remote control panel over here. But it got to a point where I'm like, enough's enough. I mean, a lot of the CNC equipment I work on at work, it's usually an e-stop or some type of small limit switch that usually fails in the thing, or a bad connection somewhere. And I just felt like with this thing being out, kind of exposed to weather, I was getting to the point where it could become unreliable very quick. And instead of coming up here and mill for a half a day, you're fiddling with trying to diagnose why a connection's not working somewhere. But just thinking outside the box and salvaging everything, and you could build something like this for pretty cheap, and it works extremely well. I've cut so much wood with this thing, and the funny thing is I haven't ran it for the last year and a half. You guys haven't seen it and posted on any of my videos because I just haven't been using it. Kind of forgot about using it for a while and came up here and the battery was dead, put a new battery in it, and basically everything worked on it. I was really surprised for sitting a year and a half, all electronic components worked. I thought maybe a pulse width controller might have gave up the ghost, but they're all working right now, so I've been happy about that. I'm going to be posting a lot of videos with this thing. I'm milling a bunch of stuff, and you guys will see a few sawmill videos coming up here pretty soon. All right, let's go down to the shop, talk about a few things, and wrap up the video. All right, video is getting kind of long, so probably should wrap it up pretty soon. I have a question for you all. What would you like me to cover in more detail? Is there any subjects you'd like me to talk about more, about some of my previous projects and how I designed them, or anything? Just ask in the comments below, and I'll see if there's enough people asking about that subject, and I'll go into more detail about that. And another thing just to kind of put out there, it's kind of about paying it forward, but in a different way. Like, I was at a little ice cream store the other day, and I was going to buy my son and my girlfriend some ice cream, and there were some people behind us, and I said, hey, put their order on my tab too, and they're like, oh no, it's all right, we ordered a cake and a bunch of stuff. And I was figuring out to offer them an ice cream cone, but they got this biggest smile on their face because of that. And it was just simple. It's like paying it forward, but like just regular paying it forward. But like, no matter what, the guy looked like this kind of crazy rocker guy, but I was just like, I'd be happy to get him an ice cream. And he was happy about it, and I was happy about it. But it's just one of those things, if you are out in public, consider, buying someone a coffee behind you or anything like that. I know it's not really same as paying it forward with like the welders and stuff in the last video, but no matter if the people might have different ideas on outlooks on things than you, or just look different than you, but just don't hesitate to do something nice for a complete stranger on occasion like that. If you're at a store and you can buy someone a coffee, it might make your day a little bit better, and it might make their day a little better. Like, wow, that was super cool that somebody did that for me. So yeah, it's just a simple little thing we can do. This world's been getting a little bit weird these days, and there's been a lot of things going on where people seem to be butting heads and bickering about a lot of stuff. And sometimes you just got to remember, like, you know what? I can't change the world, but I can maybe just make one person's day a little bit nicer. So something to consider. All right, until next time, thanks for checking out the video. Take care. Bye.